Hey guys, Melissa here, back after a brief hiatus because Melissa was learning how to be more awesome. And we're here today we really wanted to talk about like what does wellness mean? What does it mean to be well? And I think some of the levels of that, and then also I guess how messy that process can look while you're trying to get there, because I know for most of us, and I include myself in the statement, when we're starting to get well, sometimes things get more ugly before they get better. And that feels really hard because we just want to feel good, right? Which I think is what leads people to just the quick fix, right? I'm going to just take this injection or this, medication or whatever versus, or have a piece of me removed versus how can we actually heal the underlying problem. And then I think some of the areas, because I know Melissa and I talk a lot about the holistic, not just your internal being, but your mental health, um, you know, which those both overlap, right? Our physical and mental health, and what does that all look like, and how does that work? And so I think,
Yeah.
I just think that it is really important to establish, like I know the beginning of every year, I do like 4 quadrants of my goals. So it's physical, spiritual, mental, and financial. And, you know, and all those things obviously tie into how we feel every day, right? And so, but I think we have to look at ourselves in those kind of sections too, right? Like, and what are some things that I want to work on? What are some things that I want to heal? And what are some things that maybe aren't working? And I think sometimes it's easier to identify that. It's shocking to me. I know we talk about bathroom stuff a lot, right, Melissa? But it's such an indicator of health. But I know I was talking
Right.
to a woman the other day, and she's been using our greens balance, and it's been helping her a ton for a multitude of reasons, right? We could dig into why, but you know, I'm always shocked at how many women don't have regular bowel movements and think that that's like normal. So maybe that's an area for you that indicates maybe a lack of wellness or wanting to be more well.
Mhm.
But I think there's a lot of things. And so, we want to kind of help you guys pinpoint some. And I think too, it's to remind yourself that it's all not going to get fixed at once, right? That old phrase, Rome wasn't built in a day, but I think we also have to approach ourselves with that same gentleness and say, like, okay, what are some pieces I want to fix? And I know Melissa and I have been doing big work together. And sometimes it can take a little bit of time, you guys. And sometimes there's external factors that you just have to keep working on and trying to move as you keep helping yourself. And they will start to change, right? Unless it's just that sometimes it takes longer than we want. And so we just wanted to kind of visit all that with you guys, and then kind of what can you do and what are some directions to be taking. So I don't know. I hope that was a good enough intro.
Yes, I love that. So one of the things that I love that you kind of alluded to is that when we first start this journey of intending to really work on our wellness to become well, one of one of the things that we lean into is, this is going to be, I know we don't think it's going to be like really fast and whatever. We know in our minds it's going to take some time. But one of the things that is sometimes a something we aren't expecting is how many actual layers there are to being well. And I think one of the very, we always go, I do anyways, I always go to, symptoms. This is happening, this hurts, this isn't working. And so we immediately go to what is in the body, what is sideways in the body. And I love that piece because that's where I like to geek out. That's just, I get that part. But then underlying that is, okay, so what mind choices, what thought processes, what beliefs, what actual actions or, environment, all the pieces, what actually brought this to be, what created the base for this. So in the recent training that I was doing, It was really around how do we keep peeling away the layers, right? Here's the symptom or group of symptoms. Here is the body system that is off balance, that is actually creating the space for the symptom to happen. But then here's the entire body, how to look at that. But then how did we get here, right?
Mhm.
And looking at the layers.
You know, as you were talking, Melissa, it made me think of, I always think of birth control because it's horrifying. And but it just what it does to people, right? Like, but I mean, how many women are out there stopping their periods
Yeah.
because maybe they have difficult periods
Mhm.
versus figuring out why am I having difficult periods?
Exactly.
Right. And I'm not like, please no, guys, like we are never shaming anyone. We're talking about this stuff. But if you're one of those women and you're like, but I feel fine,
Mhm.
maybe you do right now, right? But you know, yeah,
Mhm.
what's the underlying issue as to why your periods are so difficult?
Exactly.
Right. I just think those are the things we need to be talking about because we're not. And that's where it's like, again, the quick fix. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna stop it. And I know people like, you know, my friends who love me and they're close to me and they are like, man, this feels like it's taking a while to like, and I'm like, okay, maybe to you it does, but like, I know how crappy I used to feel every day, all the time, right? So, sure, this process might seem long, but it's actually looking underneath and what are the core issues because, sure, we can fix some of the symptoms, but some of those core issues come way back.
Way back.
Way back. And I know for me, I can look generationally and see where they're coming from too.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's a huge piece of what people have to be willing to dig into, which is why you guys we talk about the mental health piece of it, which is where, you know,
Yeah.
I come in as a support piece for folks because if you're not identifying those patterns and not willing to change them,
Yeah.
you know, your physical being can only do so much,
Yeah.
you know, because both of those pieces really have to work together. And that includes the awareness of trauma, the release of it, as well as what are the patterns I need to shift so I don't keep re-traumatizing myself, you know, and that's sometimes easier said than done, right? Because unfortunately, especially when we're dealing with family, we can't change how people feel or think or act.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes we just have to decide how we're gonna respond, right? Um, and we can do that in a loving way, but it's also sometimes a really big piece of why you're not getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. Some pieces too that can stand in the way of us being truly well are some of our beliefs.
Mhm.
Like one of the things that I hear often is my body is broken or my
Mm,
body hates me
mhm,
or I don't feel
mm,
safe in my body.
mm.
And those things just they make me want to cry
Yeah,
because in all reality, your body has burned itself out for you.
yeah, yeah,
That's why it is having trouble. It's done everything it can
yeah,
to be balanced or retain balance,
yeah.
but it just can't do it anymore.
Right.
And when we move into the space of, okay, I want to get well, but I don't know, another one that I hear a lot is I don't know if this is going to work,
Mhm.
right? So when I hear those kinds of questions, it's like, okay, then we start digging into the belief systems. And because I already know how amazing our bodies are, I've seen so many things happen and bodies recover completely that they were never supposed to ever be well again. Like this is supposed to be permanent, but I've seen it. And to tell stories like that, that helps, that gives people a glimmer of hope. But when it comes down to it, it's like, do you believe that you can be well? And for a lot of people, that's a hard no.
Yeah,
or at least a questionable no. And that's where those questions come from, or, the statements of my body hates me, or my body is broken. Fix me. And it's like, our bodies are so beautifully made.
Yeah.
And they can.
Yeah, that is a sad thing. I do think a lot of people, and I think people kind of say those phrases off the cuff, right? But not really understanding, A, if you're speaking that over yourself, don't. But B, like, your body's not broken. Some of your habits are, right? Your patterns are. And again, you got to figure out the why behind the what. And I do think, we live in a time, you guys, where people actually want to be well, right? How many generations before us I mean, gosh, you look at people in their 80s now, and some of them look phenomenal, right? And, why is that? What is it that we're doing differently? I don't think it's abnormal to have these conversations about avoiding certain foods and not eating sugar and, all these different things. And I know I'm in a community where I'm talking to people about this stuff all the time. And trust me, I don't take that for granted by any means. That's really might become my norm. I'm not often talking to people about, standard Western things. And I think that, that helps me remember that, how many folks just have maybe watched their parents feel lousy or think that's what it's supposed to be. But I think when you're really called to live your best life and that's what you're trying to do, and you don't want to keep feeling lousy, like just kind of surviving isn't enough, then this is when you start to look at this stuff. But sometimes you're the one being called. Like, I love Ed Milet. He always talks about, like, you're the one who's being called to break these generational curses in your family. Like, he's like, I'm the one in my family, right? So, like, if you're the one who's really trying to live a good and great life, and trying to thrive versus surviving, then yeah, you're looking at some stuff that maybe people before you have overlooked or just gotten by with, or used as a crutch or an excuse. Like, I know, like, my bio dad, like, he's had asthma for as long as I can remember. And by, I guess, his generation's standards, he doesn't eat a lot of junk, but he does, he eats gluten, he's a super active guy, which is probably what has quite frankly served him. But there's definitely some things that could be tweaked, right? But he's also been on inhalers for decades and steroids and all these things, right, for this asthma. And I'm always like, man, like, what would that look like if he was really trying to fix the problem, And I don't have an answer to that per se, but what I do know is that, like, I could look at some of the similarities in he and I's health history, but also how am I addressing that differently, right? Because to me, I'm not like, well, I want to be like on inhalers for my whole life or whatever, And so I think those are the things that people need to really consider, because I'm sure you hear all the time, well, I have A, B, or C, so I'm just going to be taking whatever it is. I mean, I can't tell me how many people I talk to and they are on steroids. Well, and the only thing that works is steroids. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, they wreak havoc, right? So I feel like we get sold those lies. So when you go in to regularly change that, it takes a lot of work to uproot all that.
Yeah. So my mind goes immediately clinical when you're talking about your dad. I'm like,
of course, yeah.
Look at this and this and this and this. And understand all the, and it really potentially could be a pretty easy thing for him to adjust that if he wants to.
Right.
And I think this is another piece. Like, my husband and I were having this conversation when we were on the road the other day, is, what do people actually want to do? So, me, I want to be well now. And when I about said old and gray, but I'm already gray. So, as I advance in years, I plan to be as well as possible. And I have the tools to do that. And it's not that you know, how do I say this really, really well? There are not only two ways to look at becoming well, but for some people, it's a real stretch to even think about doing this in a holistic way and really digging down and finding out what is causing all of this. And then looking at the lifestyle habits, looking at the thought habits, the generational habits, the things that have created the space for this to happen. It's a lot of work. It's way easier to take pills.
Yep.
Or something to fix it now. But
Mhm.
then we hit a wall because we've not solved why this is happening. The downward spiral is still happening. But for some people, that's all they know. And they're okay with that. It's even more scary to go over to really looking inward and figuring out what's causing this. But like for me and for most of the people that work with me, that is their intention. They want to be fully well, not just now, but when they're old and, they want to be able to do all the things. And I really respect that there is it's a scary thing to go into the space of, can I really truly be well? And what does that look like for me? And then go all in and go, okay, yep, this is me. Whatever it looks like, whatever I need to do, I am in, because I will be well. I deserve to be well. I know I can be well. And I have everything I need to be well.
Well, and it gets messy, right? Like I know when so we were talking about muscle testing before we got on because Melissa just did a conference on this. So growing up, one of my best friends, her mom did muscle testing, did some homeopathy. Like she was really my first introduction to all this. So I remember when I was really, 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 really sick and I had full body candida and all these things going on. And I used to get chronic sinusitis, right? And so anytime I got a sinus infection, which was unfortunately quite often, I would reach out to her and I'd go over and she'd muscle test me and she'd do, I don't know, the certain points, which were
Yeah.
painful. And then she would do some homeopathy and whatever and test me to figure out which remedy was going to help. And then, this series of herbal supplements and it worked, you guys, but it wasn't fast, right? Whereas, I had been so conditioned, like, okay, you get an antibiotic in like 48 hours, you'll start feeling some relief. And it was scary at first, right? Because sometimes I'd feel worse before it started to get better. And I questioned, like, is this going to work? And, my body had so much work to do to heal so many
Yeah.
other reasons why I
Yeah.
was getting these chronic sinus infections or whatever. But when I really look, even where I am now, and that's now we're talking a stretch of almost, well, actually of 20 years since that all started, and not to frighten anyone, it may not take you 20 years, but like, it's just that was kind of the beginning of that journey for me and some awareness. And then I remember like she was like, you cannot have any sugar at all, right? So like not even naturally occurring because it was so bad. Fine. So then I cut all that out and she had me on really high doses of probiotics, but it was all working. And really it was, I probably didn't even have to take, I remember I got in an accident and they had to do surgery. And so they wanted to give me an antibiotic, like the hospital's
Yeah.
procedure. And I freaked out because at that point it had been years since I'd taken one. And I was so afraid that now my body was going to go back.
Oh, yes. I get that. A little bit of PTSD there, honey.
Yeah. And so, and I was crying, and the nurse, everyone was very nice and, they didn't really understand what I was saying, I'm sure, as I think back now. But I, was really nervous. But you know what? My body actually was able to take the doses they gave me. I didn't end up like getting candida or any of that, because my body had healed enough at that point. But I think we can have fear doing the new way and then, yeah, PTSD about these old ways, right? And what we've already gone through. And so, knowing that that's part of your process too, I think is just good to be aware of. But, when I think about just, again, how lousy I used to feel, and I'm sure you can think of this too, Melissa. I just constantly always felt tired and crappy. And I don't now, and we're still doing a lot of work, but I feel like the work we're doing now is like fine tuning. I look at it like, right. But I think because I've spent so much time really with myself and really analyzing, I've become very self-aware. And it allows me to really pick up on when something doesn't feel like it's right, you know. But I mean, I think you just have to know that you can feel better. So if you're in a state and you're like, I just feel lousy all the time, you don't have to. That doesn't have to be your norm. Um, and yeah, you can be well,
Yeah.
which I think is a really cool and exciting thing, right?
So what are some of the things that you would suggest for people when they're really standing at the threshold going, okay, I don't want to feel like this anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you got to decide, okay, where I'm going to start, and I think, doing the consultation with Melissa, and I'm happy to do one with you also around certainly the mental health stuff, right, Melissa? Because, there's going to be some mental patterning. And I will say that's probably the piece I didn't have any support on for a while.
Mhm.
It wasn't really until working with the gal before you, and then also you, Melissa, do a great job at that. Um, you know, learning that this is a big piece of it, and because there is going to be that coming up. And I think it's really valuable for folks to understand that and say, okay, so, having the conversation just to see what is this going to look like. And, I think the first piece is starting, with you and saying, what are some of the physical goals I have? And then, organically, some of the mental health blockades are going to come up, and I say mental health, like you brought up the belief systems, right? Like, I remember when I was getting chronic migraines, a loop in my head every day was, I don't want to get a headache,
Yeah.
you know, and because they was constant, right? And then they were so debilitating once they started, but it was like once I started to change food and all this other stuff, they started to lessen. But, undoing some of those blocks along with the physical work will
Yeah.
absolutely make the process go more quickly. And honestly, you guys, you want mentors to help move that along because otherwise it's a really slow process.
Right? Oh my goodness. I can so attest to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's important for us to have somebody who is kind of cheerleading us because
Yeah.
uh there are days when you doubt everything that you're trying to do and
Yeah.
it's like, is this even working? And many times having someone beside you going, okay, last week you were here, this week you're here.
Yeah.
And being able to be an objectionable, have an objectionable, not objectionable, that's not the word I'm looking for, objective view
Yeah.
of what's happening and then helping you understand that.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I love this conversation.
Well,
So
I
you
think
guys,
it's
go
important.
ahead.
I just think it is important to have some mentorship and a cheerleader because it's easy to go right back to the
Yeah,
way it was, right? If someone's
habits.
used to living off of, we'll say like Twinkies pizza, right? But that's what they've known to do. So, okay, their taste buds are all skewed, their guts all messed up. So when they start eating healthier foods, it's going to taste weird. It doesn't taste good, whatever. And so that feels hard at first, but they lose it if they don't have support.
Mhm.
And when you're doing anything new, you need that. And it's
Exactly.
also being brave enough to say that I'm worthy to get that support because sometimes the support is there and people don't believe that they deserve it.
Worthy. That's a good word, girl. Worthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys, if this is kind of where you're at and you're like, okay, I just want to be well and I know I can be well, reach out to either Melissa or myself. I always put links under this video for you to be able to contact either one of us. I always do a free discovery call. That's really just sitting down and talking through what's happening, what's worked and what hasn't, really understanding your goals and getting clear around what you want to accomplish. Melissa, what is the best way for people to contact you?
They can email me or shoot me a message through either of my social media platforms. I look at both of those very consistently. So whatever works for them.
Just to reach out.
Totally
Yeah.
cool.
Awesome. Love you
We
guys.
want
I
you to
hope this
be
has helped.
well. We want you to be well.
Yes, so much. You deserve it.
You do deserve it. You shouldn't feel lousy every day.
Yeah, awesome. Well, enjoy your day and reach out if you feel that is what you want to do for you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks. Bye.